What do we got? Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, relative to where you are. My name is Deven Morgan. I'm the Director of Youth Baseball at Driveline, founder of the Driveline Academy, and I am joined by Ben Harley, Academy Coordinator.
I'm also the head coach at Central LA College.
Oh, yeah, that too. And we'll get to the next part. And by Academy Coordinator, Coaching Operations Coordinator, Tony Davila. Good morning, Tone.
Morning.
This is episode 2. In fact, it's episode 3. We recorded a second episode that was the audio gremlins got to it, so we're going to try to kind of rehash some of that stuff, but not directly regurgitate it. And this episode will be a touch bittersweet in that our man Ben Harley is actually leaving us to go coach in the Northwoods, which is a really awesome and exciting opportunity. So, much like Dave Mustaine had to leave Metallica, Buster Rhymes had to leave Leaders in the New School. Ben is going off to coach at a higher level. And just like, man, for anybody that doesn't know, Ben and I basically started this thing together. Ben has been absolutely instrumental in, to whatever degree we have successfully kind of grown this thing and continue to execute it. Big part of the Skills and Skill Practice book. So, brother, man, I'm fired up for you to be able to go out there and coach in the Northwoods. What's the team you got?
The Kalamazoo Growlers.
That's right, the Growlers, dude.
That's going to be fun.
Yeah.
Long drive and a whirlwind, but it's been a fun last year and a half, and I feel like we've done a lot of good things. We screwed some things up.
100%.
But we've gotten pretty good progress, I'd say, for an 18-month period.
Yeah, man, absolutely. Growing this thing from zero has just been it's a lot of work, and I'm so happy for you to be able to get that opportunity to go coach in the Northwoods and then go D1 or Pro Ball or whatever.
See if we can win an NWAC game first.
I'm babe, yeah, I'm babe. What episode 2 was us kind of talking about some coaching poor behavior largely. My intention for kind of what we were going to talk about today was going to be kind of the parent side of that. But considering episode 2 is basically, we're not going to post that unless you want to listen to Tony having like an hour-long conversation with himself because he's the only one whose mic worked. I think what we can talk. Yeah, no, that's good. What we can do is probably just like roll this thing all into one, right? Because what we're talking about when we're talking about coaching behavior in youth baseball, we're largely also talking about parent behavior in youth baseball because your coaches are your parents, and which is literally like the only level of baseball that thing exists on. So basically, this is just going to be like one long "That Ain't It, Chief" segment to kind of talk about some of this coaching behavior. But I think the thing that I want to try to do is just dig a little bit deeper in terms of the why. Like it's real easy, I think, for all of us when you see like the bad examples of coaching behavior on your social media platform du jour. It just like you retweet it with like a pithy comment and you kind of just move on. But like I think you have to dig deeper to kind of understand why these choices are being made by parents who coach in this particular space. Like what's the motivation behind that? So like we'll get right into it. Let me cue up some video. If I had an assistant, I'd be like, play the clip, and I don't have an assistant. So there's our monitor. All right. So this was floating around your social medias a few weeks ago. For anybody that's joining us on a future audio only version of the podcast, I'll just try to set the scene. This is some 10U baseball in Texas, Abilene, if I remember correctly, because I read a little bit deeper onto this story. It's a 9-3 ball game, bottom 3, 2 outs, runner on third. And that's essentially what we're going to set as basically the start of this thing. And play at the plate, runner slides, ump's right there to call it, and umpire goes safe. Kid gets under the tag. So that's the impetus for basically everything that happens as follows. And then what we get is the kid goes in the dugout, umpire goes to like clean the plate, coach from the third base dugout comes out, some words are said, some fingers are pointed, coach gets bounced, and then the coach takes it upon himself to shove that umpire into the dirt. If I remember correctly, is that you later had that umpire was transported to a hospital. Paramedics had to come and get him. There actually was a follow-up video that I think got a lot less traction from the coach that was involved, and also the tournament organizer. And the coach, kudos for him, I think, for like owning the situation correctly in the aftermath. Was like, hey man, this is like fully on me. I set a bad example. It is trying to own it, and that's great. I mean, obviously, what you don't want to have in the aftermath of something like this is like, I was in the right.
Yeah.
All my decisions were great. That's not what you want. So like, shout out to that guy for obviously having the feel to like own it. But the interesting thing is they did an interview with him like on a local news show in Abilene, and he said, trying to provide context for what happened, he goes, it seemed like the calls were unfair to us all day, and apparently there was a bunch of that. And I think all of us, I can feel confident in saying we've been on fields and have felt that feeling, right? Like you feel like your team's getting jobbed, and it just like continues to like ratchet up like this feeling of like, all right, well, you didn't give us that strike there, and then you took away this, and then that runner was called. Like there's this escalation, and I get it. I 100% get it. I think the baseline issue there is that these are 10-year-olds.
Yeah, I was gonna say I've had those moments where I felt like that. Generally, it's been like varsity high school playoffs, and I'm sure you have that been in like college games where wins and losses matter a little bit more, and your job is on the line if you lose a certain amount of games or whatever. But in 10U, I think it's a little different.
Oh boy.
At least you would hope it's different.
You would hope.
So this obviously I think begs the question why. And like as a amateur armchair psychologist, again, I think the thing that this all starts with is you're talking about a coach coaching the level that is unlike any other, in that you are like less than 50 yards removed from a person you made. And like for me, having kids, having children was like an absolute revelation, because it takes you from like, I don't want to say selfish like in a bad way, although I'm sure that I was probably like I'm sure that I was very selfish, but like when it's just about you, life is just kind of like at your mercy, and you can take advantage of or waste every opportunity that you can potentially be given. When you have a child, it's like this other thing where I think for me, it's very much just like, all right, my life has to be lived in service now. Like that's just what it is. My life is lived in service to my family and my children, to provide and protect for them. Like that's it. Like that is it. That is the quality of my life at the end of the day. Whenever I end up taking a dirt nap, is going to be determined on those things. Did I provide, and did I protect, and did I obviously try to like teach them as any of the mistakes that I made, and orient them away from the failures that I've had. And that's where it gets tricky, because I think when you have men and women that played and coached this game when they were kids, and they think back about like the successes that they had and missed opportunities, like, well, if I had handled this situation differently, then maybe I could have had a better high school baseball career. And if I had handled that differently, then maybe I get a chance to play in college. And if that goes differently, then maybe I get a chance to play in the show. Like we draw this like imaginary roadmap of consequence or how that could have gone differently. And then we see our children struggling on a field where you feel like the calls are not going your way. You feel like it's unfair. Mm-hmm. And then because you had this biological imperative to protect your children from danger or the things you interpret as being fearful, obviously there ends up being this emotional component to a call at home plate in a 10U game. Like, I honestly think that if you had this same coach coaching a high school team of kids that he is not related to, I don't think it goes this way. I really only think it happens in this environment.
I mean, I'm racking my brain for, I see these videos, like you said, you see these videos kind of once or twice a week.
Yeah.
And most of them I've like looking back on have occurred at the youth level. So it's interesting that you say that, because I don't really see, I mean, maybe here and there you see a high school coach or something, but a lot of it is like youth summer tournament baseball. So, I mean.
Yeah, with the dad coaching. It's almost always connected with a family member of some sort. It's crazy how that one implication changes every action for the entire team and every kid outcome. Well, that field.
100%. And I think we will regurgitate a little, I think, of what we talked about in episode 2, the lost episode. Like the the best worst case outcome is that these kids don't want to play baseball. And that's not good. But like the worst case outcome, I think, is that these kids normalize this behavior as they move forward in the game. And whether that's the way that they approach competition for the rest of their careers, or some point later down the road where they have a family and then they coach that way because it's been normalized. Mm-hmm. Man, like that is I don't think that's where we want our game to go.
It's a slippery slope. It can just get really bad for so many different kids' experiences.
It's like so it can continue and continue.
Yeah, and like I don't know, I think sometimes about this when it comes to like some of the behavior by players that has been, again, increasingly popularized in the last like few years since like the Let the Kids Play campaign. And like I think the impetus of that is like, all right, let's celebrate the fun part of the game. Like let's try to play like we're in the Dominican, right? Let's have it be fun. Let's have it be energetic. Let's players be able to like celebrate their moments of success. I think the problem is that like sometimes that stuff comes at the expense on the person on the other side of the equation. And the tricky thing for me, like honestly, as a parent, I literally had a conversation with my son on either Monday or Sunday when we went down to the field and just hit. He was like, "Dad, can we go hit?" And of course, the answer to that is always yes, regardless of like what I have going on in my life, like regardless of how much sleep I've gotten. Like the answer is always yes, right? Because I'm living in service. We have our first round. And I'm getting everything. We go pick, and I'm getting everything back set up. And he's like, would you be mad if I like bat flipped in a game? And I literally have this conversation on video, and I was like, I don't know, man. I just don't think that's appropriate right now. And he's like, well, what if I do like the Tim Anderson? If I just do like the Tim Anderson like bat throw thing? And I was like, son, you got to understand, there's another child on the other end of that equation. And he goes, well, if it happened to me, I wouldn't care. And I was like, okay. And I said, well, what if it's a walk-off? And he goes, well, if it's a walk-off, it's a different situation. And I'm just like, all right. So the thing I'm trying to kind of draw, the dots I'm trying to connect here, right, is that like we've had this increasing sense of performance and competition outcome being stressed at the youth level. We are like professionalizing youth sport. And again, I will take ownership to whatever degree that we are complicit in that because we run an academy of a select team. Like I get that, but it's all about like the culture that you try to have your coaches create, and then that your players exemplify, and your parents participate in. When you have like children that are conditioned to believe that their stuff is really important, I think sometimes they're going to have the same big emotions that we do. And then when that comes out the wrong way, it's hard to hold the kids responsible when they're just behavior modeling off of parents.
Yeah.
It's hard to hold them responsible and be like, how dare you tisk, when it's coaches who are being just as caustic in the way that their culture on their teams. Or, I mean, I don't really want to get into this, but like college teams that behave poorly and are allowed to behave poorly. You know what I'm dancing around.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That are allowed to behave poorly in relationship to the opponent.
Yeah.
Right. I think, like there are some unwritten rules. I think we all understand about the right way to do that. It's like, it drives me nuts when I'm coaching a bag and I can hear that the coach on the other team talking to their pitcher, and they'd be like, you're going to blow it by him. Like, you talk about your guy. That's your job. You don't talk about my kid. You don't try to slip in this little, like, deceitful, like, negativity bomb on my kid. Don't do that. You talk to your athlete. And that's, you have some feel about that stuff, right?
Especially youth level. Like, there's no, it's
right.
Like for college and high school, there's some edge of that is like a little snarky, but it's generally in relation to like a game plan, like, oh, you throw 88 and this kid can't catch up to it,
sure,
throw it right by him. But like at the youth level, there's not a lot of that like detailed game planning. It's like the kid's going out there to pitch, just pitch. And so like at the high school and college level, you can get a little bit of that snarky kind of comment, sneak it in, and it's not as, but at the youth level, if you're talking about some other 8-year-old or 10-year-old, it's a little bit of a problem.
And there's a way to do that where you're just incentivizing your kid, right? Like I've been in that situation where I've coached a young kid who throws at a velocity that like it's just going to be way more about his or her ability to execute than it is about the batter's ability to try to find on time, because they're just a stage beyond. And what I say in those, like, hey man, just let it eat. Trust your stuff. Everything that I'm saying is I am trying to inspire that kid to be confident in their ability to just go compete in the middle of the zone. It's literally a conversation that I had with our 13Us last night. We have kids on that 13U team and our academy team that are up like 5 to 7 ticks in 7 months.
Yeah.
And these kids are like literally trying to like dot corners. And it's like, dude, you don't have to do that. Just let your stuff play in the middle of the zone. And it's like funny, like Kyle Bodie, El Jefe, had a podcast this week where he was talking to somebody about MLB like intended mislocation. Like it's like when Verlander won the Cy Young, I remember this distinctly. There was a stat rolling around that like his average intended mislocation was like more than a foot on the year that he won the Cy.
Isn't that crazy?
Which is nuts, right? And again, but it's a level of information that I think most of us parents don't have access to, which then informs the way that we talk to our players or the way that we coach our players in terms of like this inaccurate expectation that we put on them that just literally, yes, you will turn on an MLB game and you'll see guys just like dotting corners. And that's true. That happens. Like the guys that get paid hundreds of millions of dollars have that skill.
Yeah.
Those same guys also miss their spots.
Yeah.
Like it's okay. So it is appropriate, I think, to tell a 13-year-old team just like compete in the zone, man.
Yeah, and I think you said it kind of quickly, is like a really easy way to do things properly as a coach is like just focus on your own team, your own players. Like we have a thing in our high school where like if you're cheering or like whatever you're doing involves the other team, you're doing it wrong.
Yep.
Like, and even at the high school level with 18-year-olds and stuff, like, like you hear it all the time, like kids will go up and they're like, oh, this kid throws so slow. And it's like, nobody needs to hear that.
Yeah.
Like, I understand
like,
that's a thing, but like, okay, go make the adjustment. You don't need to be discussing this in the dugout and like making other kids feel bad. It's
the worst excuse ever for not getting a hit. He throws too slow.
Yeah.
It's like there's one person that's rattled about this, and now we're just gonna like spread it like a virus.
Right. Yeah.
And we're not doing the affirmational thing of like, all right, hey, if he or she really is that slow on the bump, then maybe the thing to think about is like, all right, let's try to stay middle with our approach. Let's almost try to stay oppo with our approach, because we're gonna try to force oppo to try to stay middle and pull.
Yeah,
it's that bad.
I guess the problem is that like they're not even talking about in-game adjustments. They're just talking crap.
Yeah.
We're just complaining.
Yeah, exactly. And like little things that like I hear all the time, like kids getting excited when another kid on the other team makes an error, or laughing or things like that. Like I coach JV high school baseball. There's a lot of JV teams out there who struggle to like play baseball.
Sure.
And I have a team. My team this year had 2 Division I commits on a JV level. So we're winning games.
You should say that twice.
Yeah, 2
Your
Division I
JV team has 2 D1 commits.
Yeah, to Power 5 schools.
Which is ridiculous.
Yeah. But I mean, so we're winning games like we won a game 23-1, and we're trying to get through these games, and like I'm trying to coach my team to do the right things, get better, things like that. But there's a way to do that without making the other team feel like they never want to play baseball again. And that I think that's a really like key thing that a lot of younger coaches or younger team coaches miss, is that like there's a way to stay aggressive, compete your butts off, but still make it enjoyable. Not necessarily enjoyable, but make the other team not hate their life while they're playing the game.
Not a miserable experience on the field.
Yeah, exactly.
You guys are not going to believe this, but there was you will believe it. I'm being facetious. I can't even remember what it was. I know what it was. There was a post that floated around this week about kids and belts. What happens if you forget a belt?
Yeah.
I don't want to completely derail this conversation. But one of the guys who was being a hardo about in the comment section there, it always devolves into how high of a level did you play, and what are you doing, et cetera, et cetera. And the guy was talking about, I did this and this, and the guy just played some JV baseball in high school, and then he's coaching a youth team, and he says, you play to win, and you play to make your opponent hate the game.
Oh, jeez.
Literally, that's a screenshot. I'm not just making that up.
Yeah, that's bad.
I should probably screenshot, but that's literally, and I was just like, all right, screenshot.
It's literally the opposite of what we want.
But what set of logical reasoning is this person using to have that perspective? Right? To what degree does this guy, because I know it's a guy, believe that in taking that approach, he is helping his kids the most?
I think that you get to a gray area when you start to talk about competition and competitiveness of coaches and players. I have it, we in those games we are winning 14-1. We tell our players to not steal every base and stuff.
Sure.
And there's a competitiveness in those players and in some coaches who might have been players that there's a reason they made it to the MLB or to the minors. They have that competitive fire. And I think there's a way to provide an outlet for that without making the other team hate the game. There is a balance of that. Is you can still be competitive, still want to play the best baseball possible without it turning into embarrassing another team or player or kid. I think that's the biggest thing is finding that balance and not letting that competitiveness turn into animosity, I guess.
Sure.
Yeah, that guy was probably taught that, right?
Yeah.
That's who his JV coach was 20 years ago, whoever it was. And snowball effect over and over and over again.
Hurt people.
Yeah.
I mean, exactly. And it's tough because so again, we're talking about parents.
Mm-hmm.
So several weeks ago we had a tournament, and we had both of our 13 teams were playing on the same field, and I was watching my son's team, and then I was trying to go back and forth and watching our other 13s play. And I went to go to take a restroom break, and I walk into the restroom, and I see this parent talking to a kid full uni who it's very clearly this kid was just it was hey coach, can I go to the bathroom? Got to run to the bathroom, do my business, and then get back in the dugout. Mm-hmm. And the kid is just trying to do his business in the bathroom, and the parent is hey man, you guys got to get the bats going.
To a 13-year-old kid.
And it's, bro, he's in the bathroom. You can't provide a moment of solitude? A moment of solitude from and again, I just, it blows my mind when you have parents in that situation that just kind of if you go to the bathroom and Jared Kelnick is walking out as you're walking in, and you want to say to Jared Kelnick, hey man, you got to get the stick going, dude. First of all, I mean,
who are you?
Who are you?
Yeah.
So let's put that to the side, but that's a full-grown adult who's at the highest level of consequence, and to a degree, part of the thing that happens when you work into that level of consequence is you have to kind of accept all the stuff that comes with it, right? Fans jawing at you from the stadium, you're trying to get your pregame working in your bullpen, and people are yelling at you and screaming at you, and and if you make an error that there's just people that'll jump on Twitter and they'll DM your wife and be you're so and so, you should go kill yourself. That's literally a thing that's happening right now.
Yeah, to pros, yeah.
So when some of that stuff is bleeding into the youth side, it's just to me, I think there has to have some sort of grand reckoning for parents to realign what we're trying to get out of this thing.
I think it's funny. I don't know if this is kind of where you're going, but I think I saw you retweeted on Twitter either yesterday or the day before, and it was I think a lot of it comes down to ego as parents and coaches.
100%.
And I saw you retweet this tweet. I can't remember what it was exactly, but it was along the lines of like, parents, stop pretending you were Ted Williams when you were playing.
Oh, Humbib. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was.
It was something along those lines.
Was
and
that? I think that was Jeff Leach. I think that was Jeff.
Yeah, it was something great like that. It was like, parents, on your ride home, stop pretending you were Ted Williams when you played. And I think that like a lot of these times, like that parent yelling at that kid in the bathroom, there's a good chance that kid is probably better than that parent was at 13 years old.
100%.
You know,
Dude,
and
I'm living that life right now.
Yeah.
I'm living that life.
Yeah, no, 100%. Like
I have to 3-hop throws to my son in long toss.
Yeah,
I weigh 225 pounds.
yeah,
Like I can probably beat him in terms of EV off of a tee.
yeah.
Pitch ball?
But when you were,
I don't know, dude.
But and then think back to when you were 13.
Sure.
Yeah, like that's like my thing. I'm young enough where like, you know, I'm only 28, so I'm just about to have my 10-year high school reunion.
Let's go. That's
So-
yeah. Good luck.
So
Depressing night.
So like I'm young enough to where like I'm coaching high schoolers.
Mm-hmm.
I was just there 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And I can recognize like I threw like 82 to 85 in high school as a lefty.
It's firm, dude.
And we're seeing kids sitting 89, 90.
Yeah.
Like I'm not here to tell anyone like you got to figure it out. Like, you know, I was this, and this. Like even someone who did probably make like a D1 team 10 years ago, like there's a lot of kids that are better than these kids. And I think that ego part is another issue that like the adults in the room have to take a step back and like take that out of their coaching or their parenting. Is like, you know, you're allowed to fail, you're allowed to struggle, be behind other kids, things like that. Like I think back to like when I played, I had a lot of like failures in my baseball career, and it helped me, I think, be a pretty level-headed like coach that can kind of connect with players on a different level than just like, we're gonna do this, and this.
Sure.
Like I gave up a walk-off home run in a league championship my junior year of high school. Like I understand what that feels like, and like and it can kind of like, you know, prevent that from happening to kids, but more in like a way of like I was great, this is how you be great. It's
Right.
like, no, like I've experienced failure, and like we want to do these kind of things because I want to protect you from those
Sure.
failures, and kind of like that parenting thing.
Yep.
Is like, but it comes from a place of humility rather than like, I was the best, you need to like follow me and do what I'm saying type of thing.
Yeah. And I think the thing that I always keep coming back to is that I think our game is disproportionately affected by this stuff because a lot of times you get like nothing yet negative developmental information. You don't get that. We get a box score. You just get a box score, right? And like anything in track and field, like you can't do track and field without a stopwatch and a tape measure. You just can't, right? And within that stratification, you're going to have a first, second, third place, right? You're going to have relay races where there is a team result, but you're also quantifying development in that. Did you throw the javelin 5 meters farther than before? Mm-hmm. Did you cut 3 seconds off of your butterfly time in a 100-meter sprint in swimming? Mm-hmm. Like it's just implicit in that game. But I think the thing that a lot of times is implicit in our game is a box score. And at the end of the day, you know, we conceptualize our game as like you're going to play 6, 7, 9 innings, and there is going to be a result. And like we do this in T-ball. Like we literally do it in T-ball. And typically, you know, T-ball leagues that I've been around, you know, it's very much like you're going to have, you know, you're going to bat the lineup, then you roll it, and then you bat the lineup. And we don't kind of keep score, although I've seen T-ball games where they keep score, and that's a whole other ball of wax. But like we're taking 5 and 6 year old children and expecting them the best way to learn how to play the game is just by playing like 3 up, 3 down, 6 inning baseball. Like that's nuts.
Yeah,
that's absolutely nuts. And like, and to that point, shout out to my man Jeff. I want to try to see if I
So we lost audio during my playing this
Uh-oh.
this clip on the show, so I'm going to go ahead and just narrate it for you. So my man Jeff, shout out to him for sending this clip. It's literally 3 seconds of a t-ball game. And when the video starts, you can see like 5 kids kind of in the picture on defense, a hitter at the plate, and a ball that's being put in play. And then what follows is just like the abject chaos and just the beautiful chaos of a t-ball game, because within about those first 3 seconds, all these kids like just kind of enter the screen. Now all of a sudden you have like 7 defensive players that are all kind of in the same like 3-foot radius. The runner from first base is trying to advance to second. Meanwhile, the runner from second base decided the best thing for him to do is actually go back to first base. They collide. The runner or the base runner, the hitter, starts to move up the field from home plate. And there's, of course, like also a well-intentioned dad who kind of like spots this chaos and tries to kind of stem the tide a little bit. And he's fielding the ball. It's just crazy and great and awesome. And man, you just gotta love t-ball.
An insane 3 seconds. That's 3 seconds of a t-ball game.
Yeah.
Imagine what that looks like over the course of like a 60-minute, hour and a half game.
Yeah.
And the thing I think about a lot is what soccer does with their game when kids are young. Pee-wee soccer, it's like 3v3.
Yeah.
Small field, small goal, right? But like it's a small field configuration, a small roster, because what you're trying to do is trying to get these kids to get as many touches as possible.
Mm-hmm.
I think I have possibly made this point about soccer practices in other environments, but I'll just regurgitate it again because I just say the same stuff over and over because stuff doesn't change. So like I just had like my same talking points for like 5 years ago. But like you look at good soccer practices and they think about the skill that they're trying to teach, and they start that skill and introduce it in like a non-constrained environment, right? There's going to be no defensive player. Your job is just like dribble around a box with the ball at your feet, try to get as many touches as possible. Don't lose it outside of the box. And you have like 9 other kids that are all dribbling in the box. Mm-hmm. So within that, there is a little bit of constraint in that, like, I'm trying to not run into you, and I'm trying to not run into you, and I'm trying to like not kick your ball, but keep mine close at my feet. And that's how we introduce the skill. Mm-hmm. And then you scale it and you introduce a constraint. And it's like, all right, now it's 2v1.
Passing, yeah,
right?
Introduce passing. Yeah.
We're literally setting the game up in that the offensive players are set up to succeed, and the defensive player really has to make choices. And then we scale it further. Now we went 2-on-1. Now we're going to go 2-on-2, and now it's an even thing. So now you get the defense and the offensive players all get to essentially learn how to make different choices, correlate those choices and perceptions with movement, and then you just take it into the game. Like every soccer scrimmage that I ran always ended with a scrimmage because I wanted to try to build that progression every time. It's hard to do that in baseball. Yeah. It's just really hard. The mechanical part of our game is like, all right, well, if you have a team of 12, like the best thing you can do is like a 4-4-4. 4 hitters, 4 infielders, 4 outfielders, and then you just kind of rotate through. But if the game action is contingent upon me being able to throw strikes, and I'm a child, mm-hmm. and I zoo balls all over the place, the whole thing just kind of, it has one really significant failure point that's contingent upon the performance of like a prepubescent child to locate a baseball in like a 17-inch wide target.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, and then on top of that, not only like the mechanics of the game, but like, I think more than any sport, obviously it's kind of a cliche at this point, but like, they say baseball is like a game of failure.
But it's true. It's a cliche, but it's just true about our game.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's also part of the problem is like we're expecting like kids to be able to hop into this game that is so based upon failure as like an outcome. And it's like, you use track or swimming as an example. Like, if you lose your track heat and you come in 7th place, wow, you still ran 800 meters at like a good time. Like that's still an impressive thing. If you strike out on 3 pitches, there's no like thing to fall back on as a kid is like, other than what we're trying to kind of get out there is like, oh, well, did you take your best swings? Did you?
If it's not built in,
if it's not
by the coaching staff.
Exactly.
And you're exactly right, because it all revolves around your coach's ability to provide context. Like mm-hmm. it's everything.
Yeah,
And
the
if you-
context isn't laid out automatically based on the sport.
Correct.
The coaches have to provide that in baseball more than anything
Yeah,
else.
you could literally have a checkbox on a whiteboard in the dugout. Be like it's a check because he had 3 good swings. And then the entire context changes for the kid. And it costs you $30 to buy a whiteboard and a pen.
Yeah.
And it changes 12 kids' experience for 3 months.
Yep.
Like simple things that can really change.
Yeah. But like, I think it all just starts with, the zero step there, which is I'm not just going to go off of this game changer box score
Yep.
to define my experience.
Which is the easy thing to do. It's very easy to just pull the box score. Be like, this is what happened.
And not only is it easy, but I think it's also the way that we engage with the game recreationally for our teams.
And as fans,
Yeah, you know,
exactly.
like I don't get a chance. I used to watch every Dodger game. I had a streak of years where it was like I got 162 in. Like I
That's impressive.
I got a call from the Mariners a few years ago because I bought like 40 single game tickets, and they called me and asked if
Let's
I wanted to
go.
buy season tickets. So I get you. I'm
Yeah.
with you. Like I can get there.
Yeah, but like so now I don't have that type of time. A lot of times I just jump on the MLB app and I'll check the box score, right? Like I mean that's how I engage with the game at that level. I think the problem is that if we don't, and again this is just like this larger reckoning with parents in youth baseball to help them understand that there is more outcomes and more outputs that they can pay attention to other than the box score. It's like we're redoing like our free programs right now, and like the free individual program and the free team program. And one of the things that's going to be in that free team program is a quality at bat tracking sheet to literally hit on what you just said, Ben, which is just like for a kid who is acclimating to the game and in skill and technique are like lagging behind. For that kid that goes up and like whiffs on 3 pitches, if there were 3 athletic swings, I'm checking that box, man. Like I am 100% checking that box because it has to start somewhere. And I would even go one step further in that I would incentivize an aggressive approach on a hittable ball, even if it was a swing and miss, as opposed to like
the slappy ground ball.
yeah, man, because just one of those things has a very it has a defined shelf life.
Yeah.
You know, like it just does. You know, we've had some conversations with some of the kids in our org over the last I don't know, probably 4 or 6 weeks about the developmental progress we've made relative to what's coming next. 12 is the last year you're on this 46-60 field in youth. I mean, obviously 12 in travel, I think around us is like 50-70.
Yeah.
But you go 50-70, 54-80, 60-90 in a real quick turn.
Really fast.
And you can, I guess, debate the merits of like the pony approach where they introduce some of the larger sizes earlier. I don't know enough to kind of say what's right or what's wrong there, but I do know that like I was talking to a parent about like the developmental progress their kid made. Kid is up like 10 ticks of top 8th exit velocity, top 8th exit velocity being like the top 12.5% of all your batted balls. Great indicator of like what you're performing as a hitter when you're going great. And the kid I think is up like 5 ticks on throwing velocity. I could be wrong about that, but anyways, I was just like, the reason that it's important to get from 60 to 65 miles an hour throwing velocity as a 13-year-old is because if you only throw 60 on a 90-foot field, where can you play? Second base?
Yeah. First,
Right.
maybe.
Maybe. It's hard to put a kid like that in the outfield because if it's a big field, now you're looking at like triple cutting a throw from right to second. I mean, double cut at least.
Yeah, that's tough.
You know, it's just, and I think what we're trying to get at is I think it is helpful for parents, again, to inform their perspective and approach. And the number one thing when it comes to some of this bad behavior is like, you can't future-proof your kid's athletic life. You know, this team of the 10U kids in Abilene, Texas, the kids that won that game, they didn't put one brick on this base of like, I'm going to go D1.
Mm-hmm.
You did not do that. You can't do that at 10. I don't think that that's a thing. I would not disagree to say that it's great for kids to learn the value of winning. I think it's great for them to learn how to engage with the game. I think it's also great for them to learn the value of losing.
Yeah,
Like,
that's what I was talking about earlier. It's like some people like, who've never had that are now like trying to instill that like we don't lose. It's like, no, I mean,
Well, and they struggle when they're adults too. If something doesn't go well in their life, they just don't know how to react to negative circumstances.
negative circumstances, like your second episode of a podcast, vaporizing the audio. You just got to adapt or die, baby. Like that's. I mean, but seriously, I think the thing that needs to be communicated to parents, if you could just grasp one specific idea, is to approach baseball like track and field. I honestly would just start there and understand that there's two layers to the way that you can kind of communicate your experience. Yes, it's going to resolve in a win or a loss. And all of us want to win. Everybody wants that. But if the only carrot you choose to follow is on the end of one stick, you are a slave to that thing. You just are. And that's not the only way that this game can be approached. And like certainly if every rec baseball field had a Hawkeye system on it, it would be a lot easier for us to get this developmental information.
That'd be sweet.
That'd be pretty sweet. Right now,
it's like the meme of the society if every field, and it's like the brand new modern society.
Yeah,
it's like
it's a
society
utopia.
if every field had a Hawkeye on it.
Yeah, like I'd love to have Hawkeye or track gun at every field. That's not going to happen. So the leverage point ends up being, again, in youth baseball, the leverage point is your parents who coach. Understanding, I think just at the end of the day, two things. You don't have to fear failure in this game at this level. If your kid is playing for Tim Corbin and failure means that you might get bounced, fine. If failure, if you're playing for you at Centralia and failure means, hey, maybe we're gonna redshirt you, or maybe we're like, fine. We're talking about adults. When we're talking about children who baseball is not their job, it just seems completely inappropriate for that to be the message. So I think it starts, number one, with just like understanding that stuff. And then I think number two is just, again, like leveraging technology to understand development. Like you can buy a couple pocket radars and start to quantify this stuff on throwing velocity. You can buy a bat sensor, you can buy a blast, diamond kinetics, you can understand that stuff. Like it's only going to get more accessible.
I think an interesting thing too is like, the technology and kind of what Ben mentioned earlier about, you can get a whiteboard
100%
and things like that. And just generally as a coach, one thing, I have an assistant coach for my JV team and he played college baseball at Cornell. He's a great player. What he does really well is throughout the game, we have game changer and box scores to tell us all that afterwards.
Sure.
As a coach, we don't need to focus on that in game. We don't need to see that a kid popped out and say, hey, you popped out, you're 0 for 1. That's in the box score.
Can you imagine?
Yeah, like and so this what my assistant coach, who's really good, what he does really well is he focuses on all those little things that you can point out to a kid throughout a game that are then, those little benchmarks of, dude, you hit that ball harder than I've seen you hit it. Like even if it's just kind of qualitatively rather than like full scale tech quantitatively, like you can as a coach focus on those little things like a kid gives up couple runs in an inning as a pitcher or whatever, but like, oh, that was the most aggressive I've seen you as a pitcher on the mound.
100%.
Like, that's the kind of stuff you want to focus on. Like you just ran into a good lineup or whatever and they hit the ball around, but that was the most strikes I've seen you throw and the best your curveball looked. That little stuff as a coach, that's the kind of stuff that you should be focusing on as a coach, not the outcome. Maybe in the 7th inning, you kind of put on your managerial hat.
Sure.
In a high school, college game, you put on your managerial hat and say, oh, we need this. So this guy who has a better average, we need him to get on base or whatever it may be. But throughout the game, none of that should matter. The score shouldn't matter as a coach. Like you were just watching what happens to that individual in that moment and what was their process throughout that moment and not the outcome. And like, I think that can dramatically change how kids interact with the game. I think we do it really well, my assistant coach and I, and those kids understand that. Like when they get on base, if they hit a weak ground ball, not to harp on the negative side of things, but like when they hit a weak ground ball and they're like, oh, I got a base hit, and it's like,
yeah, but honestly, did you?
Yeah, like did you earn that base hit?
That's really what we want.
Or a kid hits a 350-foot sacrifice fly, and he's like, dang it. And it's like, well, I mean, you hit that ball
Yeah, you hit it hard.
harder than a lot of college kids can hit it. I don't know what you're complaining about. And so just focusing on those little things, I think especially myself being a pitching guy, pitching is the area where that is like, you know, not everything's going to go your way as a pitcher. Even little things like for hitters and pitchers, like, you know, as a hitter, for example, you lay off a 0-0 curveball and the umpire calls it and it's a ball, but the umpire calls it a strike. Like, as a coach, if you then say, like, what are we looking at? Let's strike one. No, like, that totally changes versus a coach saying, that's a great take. You don't want to swing at an 0-0 curveball, especially one that you know is a ball.
Yeah.
So what if it's a strike? Like, just those little kind of attitude shifts in every moment within a game totally changes how players will kind of understand the game and comprehend the consequences of
100%.
baseball.
So basically, I think the point that we're making is that like the technology you can bring to your baseball field is a whiteboard.
Yeah.
Like
That's gonna be that cheap.
Or an attitude adjustment as a coach.
yeah. I mean, I don't know that there's anything you know, more quantifiable or research based that we can say on it other than just like it is valuable and good in youth baseball to provide additional context for the experience outside of the box score.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that we shouldn't try to win. I'm not saying that we shouldn't try to compete our tails off. I'm just saying that, like, man, the more that we are slave to the one carrot on the end of one stick, it creates this type of environment. It truly does. And like, you know, we're doing some market research on some other travel teams and like in our area just to make sure that like, well, what are we offering versus what they're offering? Mm-hmm. And like one of them, it's just like, you know, we're ranked such and such on the national whoop-de-woo, and like I was talking to Mike, our CEO, and he was just like, you don't want to compete with those teams, and it's crazy to say this, but like we really don't. We really don't. I am never going to care about a ranking of a 14U and under team. Just not 100% not going to do that because of all the decision-making process that comes downstream from deciding that that's a thing that's important.
Yeah, and if your 18U team is, sure, and if you built that because of your foundation in player development and things like that, sure. But if you're just like having to try out and getting all the best kids and calling yourself the number one ranked team or whatever, and you know, it's a little different.
Yeah, like I know, God, I think this is Coach Jack. I had somebody that messaged me just the other day on Twitter or tagged me or something. Yeah, he was like, shout out to Jack Carter down in California. He said, overall long-term development of the individual athlete would be a goal at every age and every level of play, including the major leagues. And like, my thought is it like, I don't know, from a grand majority of our industry, it's not. Yeah. It's broadly not. And I think you can paint with a pretty broad brush, almost like at the high school level on down. And just say that like we're not adequately indexing for the way that shaping this thing around development can change our ecosystem. We're just not. So like,
especially like in this era of like, you know, where we're kind of more accepting of like, you know, the mental strain in sports and things like that as well. Like we're getting farther away while we're falling farther behind in that kind of area of like, you know, kids take this sporting event now and bring it into other areas of their life mentally and things like that.
100%.
And I think, you know, I'm not here to be old man yells at cloud, especially because
I'll do that.
You know, but like, you know, it's a new generation of kids and like our youth is different. So like, and we're more accepting of like the mental health benefits of, you know, positive encouragement and things like that. And so the fact that we're like getting farther away from that while it's more needed, is wild.
Make sense.
Yeah, it's wild to me.
Yeah, and I'll go ahead and just note that like the problem with that of having an ecosystem with teams and parents and coaches and parents who coach having really divergent outcomes that they're trying to achieve is that like our kids have to play against their kids. Yep. we have 200 some odd kids in the academy now. It's certainly not big enough that we can just run our own ecosystem. We can't always eat our own food. So like we have teams who have made incredible developmental gains. And I think next time we do this, I really want to lean into that side of the things and start talking about some of the data that we have about like normative values for progression from like 12 to 13, 13 to 14, because now we've started to establish that data, which allows us to start communicating context of our approach better to parents and players. But kind of putting that part to the side, we have kids that have gained a lot, and they're in a weird space where they might not yet be tournament competitive, but they're improving so much on the stuff that matters the most, right? And I'm sure that somebody's going to yell at me for saying this, but I think the thing that matters the most is you just have to win the pitcher batter matchup. You have to win that matchup. Everything rolls downhill from that. And we have kids who are developing tools to give them that ability right now, but it's not yet resolving itself in wins and losses. And the reality is like some of those kids, if all we were doing is just like a slave to that one stick, those kids aren't developing because we wouldn't take them in our organization. Mm-hmm. And the crazy thing is that like smart major league teams have this approach. When Bodie was the director of pitching for the Reds, they signed a guy named Vincent Timpanelli. He was a men's league catcher. I think he's pumping like 96 off the bump now.
Not bad.
Like 96, 97. Yeah. Like I could be wrong. I might be understating how hard he's throwing. But like if a professional organization is looking at that type of opportunity, right? Can I turn a penny into a nickel, or a nickel into a dime, or a penny into a dime? We don't want our ecosystem of youth baseball to like be resistant to that same type of opportunity.
Yeah, I mean,
like that's crazy.
Major league organizations don't look at their single A team record and say, "Oh, our single A players are the best players." Like that is just totally not what happens. And the fact that like we look at like, for example, like our organization, if we were to say like, "Oh, like our 14U team is 6-1 or whatever they are," like
9-2.
9-2.
I mean, I'm not counting. Sorry,
but it's completely irrelevant. Like
it is 100%.
Like to especially, and even to them as they get older, that 9-2 is completely irrelevant. Just like a single A team's players, like I don't know. I think I saw one time that like the Astros single A team had like the worst record in the league or whatever. But then 3 years later, it's like Luis Garcia,
all those dudes,
on their pitching staff, and it's like it's because they don't care about like wins and losses, even in minor league baseball where people are getting paid to win baseball, to play baseball. Like, so for an organization to look at their 14U team and their 13U team and say, oh well, we have a winning record with our 13 and 14U team, that means we're doing something right. It's like it has absolutely zero relevance to what you're doing as an organization.
Yeah, like I think the longer that we get a chance to do this thing with the academy, I think you're right that like the more that we get a chance to see wins at like the 12 through 14 level should be a reflection of like how good of a job have we done serving these kids, developing tools that puts them on a path to be increasingly competitive as they go. And again, to just kind of like reemphasize the point, because you have all this change in play space that takes place between the age of 12 to 14, if you're not adequately prepared for that change, there is a minefield in the road ahead of you. Yeah. I think if you had parents and coaches and parents who coach that are more aware and cognizant of these type of changes, it forces you to look at this thing a little bit more developmentally. Now, I will also grant that like it also sucks to lose, and I think I'm spending a lot of time thinking about how we can build a system where we can try to find equitable gameplay for like 13-year-olds that are still developing, because that's a thing. Mm-hmm. And it's tough right now to even find an outlet for that, simply because a lot of the ecosystem doesn't operate on that wavelength. But just like, I don't want to have the other conversation, which is that like a parent brings to me a 12 or a 13-year-old kid, they're behind the curve, and I have to say to them, we can't take you because you're going to hurt us. because because the thing that I'm going to come back to is that the new 12-year-old that just joined with us, kid has never played baseball before. He's a bigger kid, certainly. He's probably like a genetic 14-year-old, and he's 12. But the kid hit the ball like I think 76 or something, and he's been playing baseball for like 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Like,
well, and it's funny because like we just talked about like on the major league level or like professional baseball level, like as an organization, especially as like, you know, since I was in the high school age and like playing select baseball, there's so many more teams and more like programs out there. Yeah, man. And like, and so your player pool is actually going down theoretically. And like as an organization, wouldn't you want to focus on like, how do we turn these pennies into dimes and nickels and dimes or whatever? And like as an organization, that seems like it would be a valued incentive just like in that way, not just like what's good for the kids, but like as a like kind of the more like business side and like end results for your older teams. Like, wouldn't you want to be able to have a team full of dev kids that end up being legitimate baseball players at 18 years old?
Yeah. I mean,
too worried about the upcoming weekend box score.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
I mean, I honestly, you know, maybe I shouldn't say this on a podcast, but like, I honestly think that like for like next year's 13 team that needs some more seasoning, maybe we don't do games. Maybe we do every 2 to 3 weeks, we do like a home run derby. We do a velo, like a mound velo, like a competition for like velo plus location. And we do like a ground ball, fly ball, like Golden Glove tourney. Like, because honestly, yes, I grant that the kids need to learn how to play the game, right?
Yeah.
But we also understand that like the skill is paramount. So like, what would you rather go out and play a 13U game where you get you're playing against just like somebody that has a complete, you know, mercenary approach to the game, where they're going to get up on you early, and they're going to still, you know, send runners, and they're going to still fake bunt, and they're still going to do, you know, I think what I would say is very Bush League in the approach. But like, to be really clear, I understand it, because what they're trying to do is get out of the game as quickly as possible to burn the least amount of pitching as possible, because they're looking at possibly playing 5 or 6 games in 2 days. Right? Like, I understand the approach.
For the 25 to 2 or whatever. 100%. Maybe 10 to 2 or whatever.
100%. But all I'm saying is, it's just I'm really questioning for me internally, like when you have a cohort of kids that kind of are that way. Yep. Are we better off just like completely like, let's color outside the lines?
I can't remember if they blended together a little bit for me, whether it was the first podcast or the Lost podcast that we
lost one. R.I.P.
that we talked about. You know, these tournaments where there's no sense of like, is this team gonna match up well against this other team?
Yeah.
And like,
I think that was the second episode. So yeah.
So we talked a lot about like, you know, if there was a way to kind of eliminate the like, everyone just pays for a tournament and you play who you play, and like you might match up a team against a team that you're going to lose 30-0. Like, if we could figure out like a way to kind of like, you know, have teams kind of like, okay, you know, if organizations actually measured things and said, oh, well, we have our 6 pitchers throw 70 miles an hour versus your 6 pitchers throw 45 or whatever the drastic difference is. Yeah.
That's real.
And maybe it won't perfectly match them up, but like
it'll be closer.
Yeah, you're not getting you know, a 16-year-old team who has 3 guys throwing 85 playing a 16-year-old team that has 3 guys who can touch 75.
Yeah.
Just kind of like, and that will provide a better outlet for that kind of game structure, so you don't have to kind of be worried about that and kind of fear going to tournaments and having kids hate baseball.
Yep.
I think if you can figure out a way to do that in a better fashion, and I think there are, like, I know some tournaments are trying to create like gold and silver divisions, and if you know but then again, there are some organizations who put their teams in silver divisions
a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to go.
But
I saw 13.
But I mean, to even continue on that, like what we were talking about, like with our 12U or 13U teams that need like more development, like what's wrong with them playing a good 11-year-old team or whatever, you know, or an 11-year-old team that they match up with, and not it feeling like, oh, we're playing some, like, we're so bad, we're playing 11. It's like, this is who you match up against. And like, eventually maybe you'll be better than those kids down the road because, but right now, like, having that even matchup in the game environment is what's best for everyone. And like, even the team who might be like a little bit better, like, they're not going to want to always play horrible teams. And, like, so I think it helps everyone is if you kind of can figure out that system of like, just
stratification.
Yeah, exactly.
But like at the end of the day, everybody's interest in having that system is solely dependent upon not having this, my job is I want to make you hate baseball.
Yeah.
So again, I think the thing we just kind of come back to is just like, man, so much of this is parents, you really have the power to shape this thing around the experience you want it to have. And certainly I will agree that there's a bunch of blockers when it comes to, you know, this idea of like playing tournaments, but like, maybe that's just not a thing that we need to do. You know, maybe what we need to do is kind of communicate to parents that like, look, we're just going to flip the experience a little bit and make it look more like a Sandlot. Because if we show up on a Sandlot, I think I made this point in the Lost episode that like, that's what kids are doing when they're picking teams. The children are literally self-regulating for a lot of this biological age versus calendar age, skill output, skill technique. Like that's what kids do. Mm-hmm. We on the other hand, it's just like, well, I'm gonna put together like 11 of the most stud 14-year-olds I can, and we're just gonna grind them all into dust to try to get this W. It's So parents, whiteboards, low tech, low tech, high context. I think that's just the unlock there. So I think we can wrap this thing up. I will say once again, bittersweet episode because Ben is our Buster Rhymes. He's leaving the Leaders in the New School to go have a productive solo career doing songs with Janet Jackson. I'm just fired up for you, man, to be able to go out there and crush. It's going to be fun to watch. And Tony and I will be continuing to kind of work on this thing, and we'll add in the new addition to the Academy for next podcast episode. I didn't go out of my way to hire someone that looked smaller than me, but fortunately, because Ben is leaving, I don't now look like a I can't say. Can you say a small person? I don't look like a small person relative to you guys. So, anyways. I got Deven.
I got one last thing.
Go.
To finish up what we were saying about like parents do this stuff.
Yes.
Don't be afraid to be the first movers or the first adopters.
Ooh, yeah.
That's, I think the biggest thing is like, well, parents see everything around them and they're like,
yep.
I can't do it because everyone else is doing it this way. Just don't be afraid to do it. I think that's one thing that is so like impressive about like what you've done and what we're doing here is like, we're trying to be those people to kind of take those bullets and figure this all out and then provide it all for everyone else. It's like, you know, just don't be afraid to dip your foot in the pool.
100%. Yeah, man, first through the door is going to catch the most bullets.
Yeah.
I've caught a lot of bullets.
Yeah.
But I will tell you again, to just kind of substantiate the value of what the point you made, Tone, is that like, you're not beholden to everyone. You're beholden to the 12 families and the 12 children that you have the most contact with. And if you just win those people, that's all you have to do. You just have to win, meaning that you're providing a positively emotionally validating experience for those kids. That's the if I've taken anything away from like losing like a little league end of season tournament championship game because I didn't bench the worst kids on my team. You just have to win those kids. You have to win those families.
And even back to what you talked about kind of the beginning of this is even on a smaller note, as a parent to your child.
Yep.
Like win that relationship in that situation, and if everyone does that, we'll have a better environment.
Yeah. So again, to Jeff Leach's point, like don't get in the car ride back home act like you were Ted Williams, because you weren't. I certainly wasn't. And like the majority of the conversations that I have with my son leaving games now if he wants to initiate a conversation about the game, is me asking him questions. What am I gonna say?
I was born in the same hospital as Randy Johnson. Does that count? Does that
Right.
That's like a 5 mile an hour velo tick. Easy, dude. Easy. All right. For Ben, Tony, and myself, it's the Driveline Academy podcast, the Youth Baseball podcast, Skills at Scale podcast. Apparently, I'm very indecisive podcast. We'll come up with a name for it later. Thank you guys for joining us, and we'll catch you another time.